I have been following Gordon for years. For his goddess, he struck my right ear deaf. Light as a feather, he broke my finger bones. After I left, he wrote a song for me, the main melody filled with 88 keys bidding farewell to the past. On the night of its release, he hid razor blades in the piano. As the piece ended, the blood from his cut fingers stained the entire keyboard red. Gordon knelt before me. Nancy, I offer you my hand, can you forgive me? How does he not understand? I will never look back again. Chapter 1. The day I won the competition, Gordon slapped me so hard that I lost hearing in my right ear. Little did I know, that slap was just the beginning. On the high stage, applause roared like a tide. Out of the corner of my eye, Gordon threw the flowers meant for me at his feet. People passing by trampled, and the bouquet instantly fell to pieces in the dirt. Gordon turned to chase after Julie, who struggled and wept in his arms. In an unnoticed corner, the two embraced tightly, and Gordon silenced her tears with his lips. I watched this scene from the stage. In a daze, I felt as disheveled as that bouquet. After the show, I was not met with Gordon's congratulations. Instead, I was met with a vicious slap. I fell to the ground, my cheek burning, my ear ringing. Disgust filled Gordon's face as he embraced the teary-eyed Julie. His mouth moved, his voice weak, almost angrily questioning. Who gave you the right to take Julie's chance by using despicable means? Tears welled up in my eyes, and I shivered all over. With that slap, my right ear could no longer catch sound. Ignoring the pain in my cheek, I crawled towards Gordon, pleading with him. My right ear can't hear, please. Take me to the hospital. Impatiently, he pushed my hand away, leaving me sprawled on the ground. What new trick are you playing? Those who do wrong should pay the price. Julie shook Gordon's hand on the side, gently persuading him to let it go. Gordon snatched the trophy from my arms and smashed it to the ground. The crystal shattered, its broken pieces piercing my palms. Blood flowed from between my fingers. The two walked away hand in hand. Julie turned back, flashing me a smug smile. Chapter 2. Gordon doesn't care about the truth, he only cares if Julie is wronged. He doesn't know that Julie, high and mighty, ordered me to change the highly difficult memories of Tang Huang. He doesn't know that the jade cup, filled with scalding tea, was intentionally shattered by Julie. He doesn't know that Julie did all this to frame me. He is only willing to believe that I was jealous of Julie and used means to harm her. A contestant who burned their hand but still competed is honorable even in defeat. Julie successfully gained Gordon's sympathy and affection. I became a villain who would stop at nothing to win. After that slap, my right ear could no longer hear. Gordon's father made him come and apologize to me. Gordon's face was stiff and cold. Nancy, you just know how to act pitiful in front of my dad, are you satisfied now? I cut off whatever he was going to say next. Gordon, how did you become like this now? With all the strength in my body, I asked my final question. If Julie says something, you believe it, right? Gordon sneered disdainfully. I saw it with my own eyes, what are you trying to argue? Are you overestimating yourself? He chuckled, resentment all over his face. If I knew you were this kind of person, I wouldn't have let you into the Remington family in the first place. My eardrum ruptured, the deep part of my ear still oozing pus and blood. This pain was nothing compared to those words, twisting my heart like a knife. Chapter 3. Gordon hates me, resents me, humiliates me for Julie. But in the beginning, it wasn't like that between us. When I was 10, my father died suddenly in front of the piano. I moved into the Remington family, becoming an adopted child, sitting on the couch clutching the hem of my clothes. That's when Gordon came, handing me an orange, sitting at the piano playing me a piece to soothe my fear and timidity. That day, his camel-colored sweater felt especially soft. Don't be afraid, Nancy, I will take good care of you in the future. I didn't tell him that he played 2 wrong notes in Chopin's masterpiece. In fact, I played the piano better than Gordon. Perhaps inheriting my father's genes, 2 years younger than Gordon, I played much better than him. Who would have thought, our Nancy is actually a piano genius? Gordon's dark eyes were full of laughter and approval. Blushing at this praise. The children around chased me, throwing stones and making faces, mocking me for being an orphan. It was Gordon who beat them up, brought them over to apologize to me. Nancy is not a homeless wild child, she is mine. I watched Gordon's fist, bleeding from broken skin, and tears fell from my eyes. Uncontrollably, I fell in love with Gordon. He stitched up my shattered wounds, like a beautiful dream bestowed upon me from the heavens. Until Julie appeared, slowly shattering this dream. Chapter 4. A few days later, at Gordon's birthday banquet, I sat alone in a corner. Footsteps approached from behind, Julie mocking me as she stared at the hearing aid in my right ear. Maliciously, she leaned in close to my right ear, speaking directly into the hearing aid. Just a parasite under someone else's roof, what are you competing with me for? Julie was intentionally trying to provoke me, clenching my fists tightly, remaining silent. Seeing my lack of response, she forcefully pulled the hearing aid out of my ear, her face twisted with malice. A person deaf in one ear isn't worthy of being a pianist, you little deaf girl. She provocatively released her grip, and the hearing aid fell from her palm to the ground, shattered into pieces. I stood up abruptly, wanting to raise my hand to slap her, but my wrist was tightly grabbed by someone. Gordon appeared just in time, Julie's eyes immediately turning red. Gordon, I didn't mean to, I was just concerned about her ear. Gordon's grip tightened, almost breaking my wrist. Nancy, if you throw another tantrum, get out of the Remington family. I couldn't help but let out a laugh, tears sliding down my cheeks, a hint of sadness. Gordon, do you feel no guilt at all for my deafness? This question only left him stunned for 2 seconds. He slightly furrowed his brow, a mix of conflict and pain flashing across his face. He closed his eyes for a moment, reopening them with indifference. Without hesitation, he reached for Julie's hand. His shiny shoes stepped over the shattered remnants on the floor, crushing my heart into pieces. Chapter 5. Gordon and Julie played a duet, performing Wedding in a Dream for the guests. Everyone understood without words, speculating that they were about to announce good news. Gordon's father watched with a furrowed brow, tapping his cane, and then stood up to go upstairs. Before leaving, I handed Gordon his birthday present. Considering the many years of care he had shown me, I felt grateful. Inside were 18 prayer beads, which I personally polished for half a year. The hands that play the piano are so precious, my fingers blistered from the polishing. Though my heart is filled with hatred and resentment now, I genuinely wish for his safety and well-being. Gordon didn't even bother to look at it before letting someone else take it, but Julie insisted on seeing what it was. As the wrapping was torn open, and she saw the prayer beads, a hint of mockery flashed in her eyes. So beautiful, I want them too, let's match as a couple. Gordon gently touched her head. We, Julie, deserve the best. Such a cheap thing is not suitable for you. He broke the prayer beads, raised his hand, and threw them far away. With a splash, the prayer beads I polished for half a year shattered and sank to the bottom of the fountain. Gordon treated it like throwing away a disgusting piece of trash. I turned around with a wooden face and walked away. Soft and gentle murmurs came from behind. Nancy seems angry, go and pacify her. Gordon's cold, harsh voice rang out. Leave her alone, she's just crazy. I hated how sharp my left ear's ability to catch sounds was at that moment. Chapter 6. As I was about to go downstairs, Julie caught up with me from behind and called out. Nancy. Without looking back, I continued walking forward, and she let out a sharp, sarcastic chuckle. What a good name, really suits you being deaf like this. When I was a child, my father held me on his knee and played the piano for me to listen to. He said he gave me this name to teach me to feel the music, to use my heart first, and then my ears. This was the last symbol my father left for me, not to be defiled. I turned my head, eyes burning with fire. Say one more disgusting word, and don't blame me for tearing your mouth apart. Julie contained resentment, then smugly reached out to fiddle with the rose brooch in front of me. Don't you want to know why Gordon hates you so much? At this point, I no longer cared to know. The packing service had already been arranged, and tomorrow I would move out of the Remington family. I would never see the two of them again. I was disinterested in passing by Julie, but she grabbed my hand and whispered in my ear. I can't tell you. Then she suddenly leaned back, fell down the stairs. With a loud noise, Julie fell below the steps. Her forehead was cut, a small trickle of blood flowing down. The crowd gasped, and Gordon rushed over, his eyes red, picking her up and shouting to take her to the hospital. I stood there, cold, my head feeling like it was collapsing. The ICU light stayed on all night, and that night, Gordon went mad. I was forced to kneel in front of Gordon, his hand squeezing my throat, veins bulging. My face turned red, eyes bulging, feeling unable to breathe. Gordon really wanted to strangle me alive. Cool tears welled up in my eyes, and seeing my tears, Gordon released his grip. In the next moment, he seemed like a cold and heartless demon. Which hand did you use to push Julie? Your right hand, right? The shiny leather shoe stepped on my hand. Intense pain rushed over me, I couldn't help but cry out for mercy, cold sweat soaking through my clothes. The sound of bones crunching pierced my eardrums. Julie was saved. And I could no longer play the piano. Chapter 7. Bone damage is basically irreversible. Dragging my suitcase out of the Remington house, my right hand in a cast and wrapped in thick bandages. Gordon's father handed me a bank card. Nancy, you've been through a lot. He began to cough violently, his silver-streaked temples trembling. I didn't take it, smiling and shaking my head. If it weren't for Gordon's father's years of nurturing, I would definitely have called the police to have Gordon thrown in jail. Leaving the Remington house was not a compromise, but a break. Gordon didn't show up. Gordon's father made him kneel all night, then ruthlessly beat him with a cane, rendering him unable to get up. I knew that behind the upstairs window, Gordon was silently watching me leave. Passing by the lotus pond in the courtyard, I raised my good hand with force. A necklace shimmering with silver was thrown into the mud, perhaps to rot there until it rusted away. The action was a few degrees more efficient than Gordon throwing the prayer beads. In my heart, I silently recited, such a shabby thing is not suitable for me. Shortly after arriving at the Remington house and losing my father, I fell ill, with a continuous high fever at night. Gordon's father went on a business trip out of town, leaving the house empty. It was Gordon who carried me to the hospital. That night, he was sweating profusely as he ran several kilometers carrying me on his back, losing one of his shoes. The necklace was something he bought for me on the street after I woke up. He said dream catchers would bring me good things. Now, for me, these were already trash. He would always choose Julie. At this point, I suddenly realized that the budding feelings of my youth had long been exhausted. I could have immediately paid off all the money I spent from the Remington family with the money in my hand. But I didn't want to. I had more important things. I wanted to ensure the best treatment for my right ear and hand bones. This is what Gordon owes me, not the other way around. Chapter 8. In the hospital, the doctor with cold eyes gently pinched my ear. His warm breath brushed against my neck, slightly tickling. I lowered my gaze uncomfortably, and his name tag came into view, Kyle. What a good name. Your ear and hand must not touch water, I'll prescribe some more antibiotics for you, and you must avoid spicy food. Dr. Kyle took off his mask and carefully instructed me, revealing his face to me for the first time. The sunlight cast a glow on his stern and handsome face, his dark eyes revealing little. A hint of a delicate Adam's apple showed through his tightly buttoned collar. This was the city's most renowned surgeon, so young and handsome. I was momentarily blinded by the sunlight, and Kyle stood up to close the blinds. Until your hand fully recovers, you must not play the piano again, understood? How did he know I played the piano? Before I could speak, I realized the meaning behind his words, my lips trembling uncontrollably. You mean, there's a chance for me to recover? A smile crept into Kyle's eyes, as he was backlit, giving him a golden halo. Yes, I will find a way. After exchanging contact information, Dr. Kyle reminded me to come for a follow-up appointment every week. The recovery period was long, but the cast was removed quickly. A scar marred the once delicate joints of my fingers. It was the mark of the stitches, somewhat unsightly. Deep down, I still cared a little. Unexpectedly, during one of my recovery sessions with Kyle, he slipped a finger sleeve onto my hand. The scar was cleverly hidden. The finger sleeve had a pattern of a cloth tiger, lively and vivid. I couldn't help but chuckle. I never knew Dr. Kyle had such a playful side. A passing nurse exclaimed, "Dr. Kyle, did you specially buy this finger sleeve for Nancy? How cute." Kyle awkwardly clenched his fist and cleared his throat. "I bought it for my niece, it just happened that you needed it." His ears turned slightly red as he avoided my gaze. I thought, Kyle is truly a gentle and caring person. Chapter 9. It had been 3 months since I last saw Gordon. Gordon's father asked me and Gordon to attend a charity banquet on his behalf. Julie clung to Gordon affectionately. "I'm his date for tonight, I hope Nancy doesn't mind." I scoffed indifferently. "Do you think I care about anything?" After many days, this was the first time we met since that night. She and him shared a knowing look, as if nothing had ever happened before. I am more carefree than I imagined. Gordon's gaze seemed to pierce through me, his face showing a fleeting expression of pain and conflict. "I have no relationship with Gordon tonight." Julie pulled Gordon to sit down first, pushing me behind. The host of the banquet opened a velvet box, revealing a necklace adorned with a sapphire. Its name, Shark's Tears, instantly flashed in my mind. It was the token of love my father bought for my mother. Mom had terminal cancer, and she wore this necklace in her final days. Dad had donated almost all of our assets to medical causes, including selling this necklace. After so many years, tonight I was determined to buy it back at any cost. Most of the people present were aware of my identity and kindly refrained from bidding against me. Julie glanced resentfully, shaking Gordon's arm. "So beautiful, I want." Gordon's expression turned grim, his back and neck stiffening. "Forget about this one, I'll buy you something better." Julie bit her lip, coaxing and flirting in his ear, finally getting him to agree. She eagerly raised her bidding card, then provocatively looked back at me. "Nancy, although this necklace belonged to your mother, I also really like it. Can we compete fairly? I spent my hard-earned money, she spent Gordon's money, where's the fairness in that?" My fingers beneath the hem of my skirt clenched together. Back then, she was also so arrogant, claiming she wanted to compete fairly with me. Then, on the day of our coming of age, when I dressed up meticulously, carrying the love letter for Gordon, I pushed open the door to the music room. In the dim light, Julie embraced Gordon from behind and kissed his cheek. Gordon didn't refuse. Moonlight scattered on the ground, through the crack of the door, Julie looked straight at me with a victorious smile. And so, I fled in despair. But that wasn't enough for Julie, she wanted to twist the knife in my heart once more. The next day, she cornered me in the music room, taunting me like a cat playing with a mouse. "Gordon has liked me for a long time, what do you have to compete with me? Fair competition? It was just me toying with you." From that day on, I forced myself to gradually let go of Gordon. Today, I have long moved on. Chapter 10. When Julie mentioned my mother, Gordon's eyes darkened. Competition? What can Nancy afford now? Without the Remington family, she's just a pauper. I can buy it for you too. Gordon turned to meet my gaze, filled with sarcasm. Julie called out his name in disbelief. "After you kneel at the piano and play a piece for Julie, I'll buy it for you." My knuckles turned white, my throat constricted. The piercing humiliation stirred up my overwhelming resentment and anger. Almost without any thought, I grabbed the red wine next to me and splashed it harshly. Amid Julie's exclamation, Gordon was left drenched. The alcohol soaked his hair, dripping down his prominent nose. The red splatters on his white suit merged into one. The hall fell silent, Gordon lifted his eyelids, his expression dark. He grabbed my arm. Nancy, have you gone mad? A slender hand like jade grabbed Gordon from the side, forcing him to release me. Are you the crazy one? She's injured, and you're forcing her to kneel and play the piano? I looked at the newcomer's face in surprise. Dr. Kyle? Kyle didn't appear as gentle as he did in the hospital. He took off his white coat, the suit emphasizing a hint of reckless arrogance in his features. Also, please show some respect to my patient. Upon hearing Gordon's face suddenly changed color, his eyes burning with rage. Does a doctor need to intervene in a patient's private matters? He emphasized private matters, his voice cold and cutting. Kyle held my wrist, gently but firmly, and raised his hand to call security. A doctor may not have jurisdiction, but the hosts of this banquet do. The hosts of this banquet were none other than the prestigious Caldwell family in the circle. And Kyle, as he implied, was the medical genius from the illustrious Caldwell family. A glint flashed in Julie's eyes. She put on a perfect smile and extended her right hand. You must be the medical genius from the Caldwell family, a pleasure to meet you. Kyle avoided Julie's hand, turned around, and led me away. Numerous eyes turned in our direction, my gaze lowered to the distinct knuckles on his wrist, my cheeks slightly flushed. Behind us, Gordon angrily kicked over a chair. With a clatter, he pushed past security and Julie, striding out. I felt a sense of relief in my heart. Gordon, you truly resemble a petulant clown now. Sitting next to Kyle, I unconsciously fiddled with the finger caught on my hand. I apologize for disrupting this banquet. Kyle turned his face, the fragmented light shining in his eyes, adding a touch of brilliance. No need to apologize. If I were you, I'd have slapped him. I pressed my lips together, quietly curling them into a smile. Back at the apartment building, Gordon's car was arrogantly parked downstairs. I walked straight past without looking, and he rudely honked the horn loudly behind me. The sharp sound pierced my ears, and I instinctively covered my right ear uncomfortably. The car lights blinded me, and Gordon rolled down the window. Nancy, get in. He gritted his teeth slightly. My father wants to see you. Gordon's father wanted to see me, so I obediently got into the car. Gordon saw the necklace box through the rearview mirror, and his expression darkened once again. He tapped his index finger on the steering wheel, a sign of his impatience. What's your relationship with Kyle? He asked. I closed my eyes, too tired to bother with him. Gordon's eyes turned pitch black, his eyebrows furrowing imperceptibly for a moment. Nancy, why didn't you just stick to Kyle tonight? He sneered. A person like Kyle, you can't reach his level. I couldn't hold back and retorted. Gordon, if you have rabies and like to bite people, go get treated. Gordon's face darkened, and he revved the engine angrily, as if jealousy filled him. It was ridiculous, he had no right to judge my relationship with Kyle. In front of both of us, Gordon's father opened a dusty box. Inside was an old sheet music book with a young photo of my mother clipped to it. Turns out, my mother was so beautiful before she got sick. Gordon's father, still not fully recovered, coughed twice and took a breath before speaking. Your mother asked me to wait for the right time to give you this sheet music. Having kept it for so many years, today seems like the right time. Gordon's father gazed softly at me, as if seeing a similar person through me. Gordon clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles cracking. His face turned purple, eyes widening in anger as he suddenly stood up from the sofa. Having kept it for so many years, is it the wrong timing or just your own selfishness? He leaned in, furiously sweeping the box, the sheet music, the photo, all onto the floor. I quickly crouched down to pick them up, a roar exploding in my ears. Don't act all righteous, you divorced my mom just for this woman. Chapter 12. The room fell into a deafening silence, not even a pin drop could be heard. I remained in a half-crouched position, fingers tingling, a slight tremor running through me. Gordon's father started coughing violently, a hint of pity flashing in his eyes. You've misunderstood me. I divorced your mom because of her mental illness, never because of someone else. In Gordon's ashen face, I heard the truth. Gordon's mother suffered from severe delusions and mania. At her worst, she imagined her husband cheating, even resorting to self-harm and attacking others. Gordon overheard his parents arguing one day. Through a crack in the door, he heard his mother hysterically screaming, accusing her husband of falling in love with a friend's wife and bringing the friend's daughter into their lives. Gordon's mother initiated the divorce, leaving behind her husband and child to seek treatment abroad. Staggering back, Gordon's face displayed disbelief. His hands clenched the edge of the table, veins bulging, trying to steady himself. Pale lips trembling, he murmured. "Impossible, this can't be." Gordon's eyes sharpened. "You lied to me, my mom has a mental illness, how did I not know?" Gordon's father sighed deeply. "This illness could possibly be hereditary. To spare you from psychological stress, your mother and I decided to keep it from you. Never did we expect you to be so misunderstood." Clutching his forehead, Gordon's eyes turned crimson. "She clearly said she hates you, hates Nancy's mother, hates her failed marriage. How could this be? How could this be?" Tears welled up in Gordon's father's eyes. "It's because she wasn't in her right mind when she was ill." He pulled out diagnostic reports and records from a drawer. Trembling, Gordon reached out to take them, almost dropping them. I stood by, witnessing the long overdue confrontation between father and son. Julie never told me why Gordon hated me. Today, I finally found the answer. Why his attitude changed, why he hated me so much. Why that day I joyfully prepared a gift for him, only to be pushed to the ground. Get lost. From today, stay away from me. Why he turned so cold every time my mother was mentioned. But at this moment, I no longer cared. I just felt a sense of irony filling my heart. How ridiculous. Bending down to pick up the scattered items, nodding at Gordon's father, I walked out without looking back. A hand grabbed my arm, and Gordon called my name softly from behind. "Nancy." His voice was filled with pain. I turned my head, calmly meeting his bloodshot eyes. "Gordon, from start to finish, you're just a complete idiot." That hand fell limp. I lifted my foot and passed him by. Chapter 13. I heard that night, Gordon smashed his own room to pieces. However, it was Julie who came to find me first. "Nancy, don't get too cocky." Having discovered the truth, Julie was no longer calm, appearing somewhat flustered. "So what if it's a misunderstanding? I am still his goddess." I took a sip of coffee, crossed my arms, and stared directly into her eyes. Julie's emotions escalated. I was there for Gordon during his most painful moments. I wrote him letters. "We were about to get engaged, you can never replace me." I tucked my hair behind my ear, a hint of sarcasm in my smile. "Did he know those letters were taken from me by you?" During the time when Gordon's parents were constantly fighting and divorcing, Gordon was surrounded by despair and pain, and I wrote him letters. He rejected my attempts to approach him, so I had Julie pass them on, and that's how the letters were stolen. Gordon detested me to the extreme, he wouldn't believe anything I said. Julie's expression went blank for a moment, and I continued. "Julie, do you really love Gordon?" This question ignited the darkest thoughts in Julie's heart, and she exploded like a bomb. "So what if I don't love him?" "What you have, Nancy, I have every right to have. Mansions, luxury goods, Gordon, I will take everything you have." With a click, the sound of the phone ending the recording echoed. I stood up in front of Julie's terrified eyes. "You've schemed against me so many times, it's time for me to come back at you." A figure behind me swayed unsteadily. Gordon's eyes, bloodshot, almost unable to stand, leaned against the sharp corner of the screen, his eyes glaring fiercely at Julie. I smirked and walked out, leaving Gordon with red eyes and pale lips. A tear streaked down from the corner of his eye. Gordon turned his head, trembling, blocking my path. He called my name, his trembling voice filled with a humble plea. "Gordon, those who do wrong must pay the price." I raised an eyebrow, calmly admiring his pain, taunting him in a low voice. "These were your exact words that day." In the background, Julie's cries mixed with Gordon's roars. Leaving the box, I tightly squeezed my palm with my fingers, leaving deep red marks. I had to force myself to stay awake. I had to maintain enough calm and indifference. I had to appreciate Gordon's failed attempts from a position of superiority. Gordon, this is what you owe me. Chapter 14. When I went for a follow-up appointment with Kyle, I brought a vinyl of Chopin. Thank you for last time. I handed him the vinyl. I don't know if you like piano. Kyle's pupils were clear, but at this moment, he stared at me with a depth that was hard to fathom. I once liked piano because of someone. I wanted to hear more from him, but Kyle changed the subject. Hospitals do not allow doctors to accept gifts from patients. Most likely he was refusing. I felt a bit embarrassed, slightly awkward. My hand holding the vinyl froze in midair, neither giving nor taking. But last time, it was within the scope of our privacy, right? His fair hand rested on the edge of the vinyl, making it look like a gem. He eagerly awaited my response, even saying, deciding. His gaze was oppressive, as if it had substance falling on my face. Without thinking, my throat went dry. Yes. It's private. Kyle flashed a moonlight-like smile at me and took the vinyl. Before the follow-up ended, I couldn't help but ask again. Dr. Kyle, is there still a chance for me to recover? Kyle avoided answering, pausing with the pen in his hand. Our eyes met. Nancy. For the first time, he called me that. The air suddenly became hot, something was fermenting. Hearing needs to catch up to the heart to feel. Your name, is that what it means? This sentence was like a thunderbolt, triggering a flood of emotions in my heart. From the chaos, a ray of light broke through for me. Kyle smiled again, with a joyful expression. Just as I arrived home, I was stopped downstairs by Gordon. His face was pale, eyes sunken, beneath his bloodshot eyes, a deep darkness lingered. It seemed like he hadn't had a good night's sleep in a long time. Trembling, Gordon stopped me to show me something on his wrist. Oh, it was the Buddhist prayer beads that were thrown into the fountain on his birthday party. I had ground them for half a year, treated as trash, and thrown away. Nancy, I spent the night in the fountain. There were a total of 18, and I made sure to retrieve every single one. I ignored him, turning away from him. Gordon grabbed my left hand without letting me refuse, forcing me to open my palm. A cold necklace was thrust into my hand, his eyes bloodshot, his throat almost choking up. I drained the pond, turned over the mud for 3 days, just to find it. Nancy, please continue to wear it for me, okay? I forcefully shook off his hand, and the necklace fell to the ground at my feet. The once clean silver was now covered in dust. Gordon seemed to lose all his strength in an instant, kneeling at my feet, reaching out to pick up. Gordon, that's all in the past now. My words made him hunch his back, frozen in place. After a while, 2 teardrops fell into the dust. Chapter 15. Gordon began to almost frantically beg for my forgiveness. He grabbed Julie by the hair, forcing her to kneel in front of me. Julie no longer had her previous arrogance. It seemed like she had been through a hard time during this period. Her once haughty face was now full of humility and cautious attempts to please. Julie's family background was far inferior to the Remington family, making it easy for Gordon to control her. She cried with tears streaming down her face, kneeling before me. From those deliberate approaches, to the covert instigations, to the stolen letters, intentionally spilled tea, and deliberately rolled stairs. One by one, she recounted everything from her mouth. Before I could react, Gordon kicked her to the ground, and Julie crawled to my feet with her disheveled hair, grabbing onto my skirt. Nancy, I know I was wrong, please forgive me. With his eyes bloodshot and about to make some extreme move, I stepped forward to stop him. Gordon, you are much more despicable than Julie. Seeing him standing there stunned, his face gradually turning pale, I added a few more words. Throughout, that's how I've always felt. Julie made mistakes, she provided an outlet for your emotions, but the one who truly hurt me has always been you. Gordon, you are just the same now, using Julie as a vessel for your emotional release. You and her, I will never forgive. In fact, Gordon and I were the same kind of people, stubborn. Stubborn enough to make a decision and never look back. After that day, Gordon became more cautious, obsessively seeking my forgiveness but not daring to come close to me again. Even when it snowed, he stood outside all night, braving the wind and dew for me. Gordon's father called me, his words filled with sighs. As the recovery period slowly passed, under Kyle's guidance, I picked up the piano again. There were hidden injuries in my fingers, needing some adjustment. I practiced for 3 months, and it was already late winter outside. From the initial intermittent playing to gradually regaining the original feeling. Gordon was always listening downstairs. The sound of the piano reached outside, entering his ears. The sharp blade he had thrust into me now felt like a boomerang piercing his own heart. I wonder how long he stood outside listening to me play. Until the next day when I left, his black coat and hair were already covered in a layer of snow, his face paler and more haggard than the snow itself. Gordon, stop torturing yourself, and don't appear in front of me anymore. You know, I can't turn back. Those words struck him so hard that his face turned almost transparent, his hand clutching his chest. Tonight, I returned to the orchestra and back on stage. I invited Kyle to be in the audience, but he insisted on coming to pick me up. In the cold winter of December, Kyle somehow got a bouquet of lilies. When he handed me the fragrant and pure white lilies, he whispered a message. Welcome back to happiness. I smiled as I accepted the flowers. And I also accepted Kyle's good wishes. Chapter 16. Gordon was completely ignored by both of us. What is your relationship with Nancy? This dry, pitiful, and cautiously inquiring question made me notice Gordon's lips were already cracked and peeling, with a spot that was slightly bleeding. Kyle looked coldly at Gordon and replied indifferently. I was the one pursuing her. At the charity banquet, Gordon disdainfully said Kyle was out of his league with me. Now, Kyle stood in front of him, telling him that he was pursuing me. It's time, get in the car. Kyle moved to the other side, gently opening the car door for me. He and Gordon were two different characters. Actually, at the charity banquet, when Gordon's car lights arrogantly blinded my eyes, what I saw in front of me was our first meeting. The sunlight had dazzled me, and Kyle stood up to close the blinds for me. My colleagues in the orchestra put up a banner welcoming my return. In casual conversation, I heard that during my absence, Julie had been fired for bullying other colleagues, causing quite a stir. She left the group and won't be appearing again. Without a doubt, this was Gordon's doing. If Julie were to appear in front of me again, it would only serve as a constant reminder to me and to Gordon of all the things they did to me. The long-lost spotlight shone on me, bringing a hint of warmth. I closed my eyes, stretched my fingers, and the sound of the piano flowed like water. My soul was in the clouds. The audience fell into a long silence, then erupted into thunderous applause. Backstage, I held the bouquet of lilies and took a photo with Kyle. A colleague helping with the photo couldn't help but exclaim. Such a perfect match. The last note was awkwardly choked in my throat. Gordon appeared behind us, a hint of light pink beneath his eyes. The frost of winter spread, and others discreetly left the theater. Gordon handed me a crystal trophy. Nancy, congratulations on your successful performance. His throat trembled up and down twice, as if swallowing a lump. I found the pieces of your trophy, restored it to its original state. I thought it was snow falling on his head before. Now, as the light flashed, I discovered that he was actually quite young, yet had gray hair. I sighed and didn't take it. Gordon, this trophy doesn't hold any meaning for me anymore. I haven't liked you for a long time. Chapter 17. In that moment, Gordon's expression turned blank. He seemed like someone suddenly struck with tinnitus, covering his ears tightly, painfully crouching down. Like a beast losing its mate, Gordon hoarsely questioned. How can you forgive me? His hoarse voice penetrated through the desolation, tears sliding down his swollen eyes. Nancy, I don't want to lose you, I can't be without you. Gordon's father told me that every time Gordon hurt me, he also felt deep pain and conflict within. A few days ago, Gordon got drunk like a fish and cried in his father's arms all night. He said that when I went to the hospital for a checkup, Gordon kept staring at me. He even used his connections to get me an appointment with Kyle. As the most renowned surgeon in the city, Kyle was in high demand, yet I easily got an appointment. I never thought about Gordon's involvement in this. But what difference did it make? The harm he caused me can never be undone. I thought about our first meeting, the closeness and fondness I felt for Gordon. Sadly, I realized I truly no longer liked him. Gordon, stop pestering me. Gordon stood up dejectedly, walked out listlessly, as if his soul had been ripped away. I couldn't quite shake off the burden, my emotions still weighed down. The theater emptied, and Kyle and I walked past the curtains, preparing to leave. But he stopped me. Nancy, I can actually play a bit of piano too, would you like to listen? I felt a spark of interest and nodded. Kyle and I sat side by side at the piano, his hands fair and slender, joints distinct. The hands that wielded a scalpel could also dance nimbly on the keys. It was a familiar tune, Chopin's final masterpiece. Do you still remember when I mentioned if you particularly liked the piano because of someone? He smiled, turning his face towards me to ask. The first time I heard this piece played was in the hospital. There was only one hospital in this city, with a piano placed in the lobby. It was the hospital where my mother was admitted after being diagnosed with a terminal illness years ago. I tried to search my memories, but Kyle chuckled. When I was a child, afraid of pain, crying nonstop in the hospital after fracturing my leg, no one could comfort me. It was a girl who played this piece for me. At that moment, I forgot to cry. Her parents stood not far away, clapping proudly. Later, when I saw her again, I recognized her at a glance. He was describing our past encounters. A slight smile unconsciously rose at the corner of my mouth. In a daze, I recalled that period of time, filled with white walls and the strong scent of disinfectant. My mother held my hand and, in her final days, told me to stay strong. Mother, I have done it. I have been strong enough, brave enough, and crossed the hurdle named setback. But at this moment, I haven't quite sorted out my feelings to start liking someone again. Kyle understood this empathetically. He kindly told me that Gordon's pursuit of me was sincere. He asked me not to feel burdened or to respond immediately. He would give me time, having enough patience to wait for my decision. For now, I just needed to consider him a reliable friend. I found that Kyle truly possessed a kind of magic. He made the interaction between two people comfortable and easy. Chapter 18. Returning to the band was just the first step. My next step was to win the championship in the international competition coming soon. To everyone's surprise, Gordon did something almost obsessive. The Remington family made its fortune in the entertainment industry, primarily in record distribution. Gordon locked himself away for half a month and wrote a song with the most famous production team. Featuring a distinctive melody, it heavily utilized all 88 keys. In just a few days, it became the hottest new song of the moment. The song was titled Late. On the night of its release, at the repeated urging of Gordon's father, I reluctantly went to the event. A journalist brought the microphone to his lips. May I ask, why did you use a significant number of 88 keys in creating this song? Gordon's gaze fell on my face through the crowd. That's because I wanted to tell someone that we should say goodbye to the past and start anew. I listened to this dialogue impassively. The journalist sensed the gossip in the air and wanted to ask more questions, but Gordon had already taken his place at the piano. As the melodious piano notes filled the air, he played much better than the first time we met. I closed my eyes to listen. The faint noise around me made me open my eyes again. In that moment, I saw that Gordon's fingers were already covered in blood. He was a madman. He had placed blades on the 88 keys. With each strike of the 88 keys, his hands had more cuts, and he was playing in an almost self-destructive manner. The white keys gradually turned red with blood, leaving everyone stunned. As the piece ended, in the silence, Gordon stood up. He took the microphone and knelt down in the spotlight in my direction. Nancy, I offer you my hand, can you forgive me? Gordon was truly insane. I faced all of this in disbelief, overwhelmed by the tidal wave of gossip. Someone handed me the microphone. Tears welled up in my eyes. People thought I was moved, but the words that came out of my mouth were cold. Gordon, you are as selfish as ever. Someone told me that with music, the ears need to feel before the heart does. Gordon, love is the same way. For me, you were once a scab on my heart, which would bleed and fester when broken, but now, that scab has healed. Don't do meaningless things anymore, because in my heart, you are nothing. Gordon, with blood all over his hands, listened to my words word by word. All the light in his eyes extinguished in an instant. As if his backbone had been ripped out, he fell down, tears streaming from his eyes. Staff members rushed to help him. I got up and left without looking back. Everyone watched in silence. After that day, Gordon never appeared in front of me again. The incident that night caused a small commotion on the internet, but all voices eventually faded away. Perhaps the Remington family intervened, or maybe it was Kyle. I didn't have time to think about it because I had more important things to focus on. Chapter 19. On the day I won the international piano competition, Kyle personally presented me with flowers. The bouquet was of lilies, which I really liked. The winning piece was chosen from the sheet music my mother had left me. Finally, I understood why she waited for the right moment to have Gordon's father hand it to me. The emotions in the piece required experience to comprehend. Kyle stood out among the award presenters in his white suit, looking exceptionally handsome. The white attire complemented his features perfectly. Standing next to me in my white gown, we looked like a couple in matching outfits. It was hard not to suspect that it was intentional. At least 3 people had already praised us for being a well-matched pair. On the elevated award stage, Kyle and I embraced each other. In a moment of daze, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure. It had been a long time since I last saw Gordon and Julie. Julie, I heard, had retired from the industry, and their family had faced bankruptcy, completely disappearing from the scene. As for Gordon, we both silently avoided each other. I still visited Gordon's father often. After all, he raised me and was like a second father to me. I could sense Gordon watching me from behind the curtains upstairs every time. Just like the day I left the Remington house. But it was comforting to know that he had finally stopped torturing himself to seek my forgiveness. The figure that flashed by below the stage, I couldn't be sure if it was him or not. But even if it was him, it no longer mattered to me. I could hear the sound of Kyle's heartbeat, his hidden shyness, and excitement. After the awards ceremony, Kyle and I drove to the cemetery. The bouquet of lilies in my arms was placed in front of the grave. It was the first time I had brought Kyle to see my parents. This is Kyle, I really like him. I took the hand of the person beside me, feeling their warmth like jade. He paused for a moment, turned to look at me, his ears slightly reddening. But his grip on my hand tightened, asserting dominance over mine. A gentle breeze stirred the petals of the lilies. Then it lifted the hems of our clothes. As if someone had gently embraced us.